lovely to be here this morning. Thank you for coming to this track to listen to me and us. That was amazing. Really made me think about how we design challenges with participants in mind. I'm going to go away and think about that and action it, so thank you. So this is a kind of how-to session. So if you've done loads of challenges and you know how to write them, then there's probably coffee outside. If you're interested, then stick around for 20 minutes or so. Set my timer. So our mission is to help the suits meet the sneakers. So we run a whole bunch of programs with large companies or government departments, and those are what we call the suits, and we help them meet the sneakers for fun, mutual profit, and innovation. So we've got a whole bunch of networks. So there's some of our suit clients on the left, and the sneaker networks, we have about 250,000 high growth companies and academics, and in the middle there is us trying to help these guys work together, as I said before. The thing that drives, I think, our whole business and what we've been doing for the past almost 10 years, wow, is this, I think, that Bill Joy from Sun said once: no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for somebody else. And if that's true, what do? Do you hire them all? No, that's impossible. You have to engage them in some way to help you. And one of the ways of engaging them to help you is to stimulate their imaginations and to ask them interesting questions that they feel compelled to answer. So this is part of a tool set that we've made freely available on our website, 100open.com/toolkit. And this is Creative Commons. So what we're trying to do here is create high standards for the crowdsourcing and open innovation industry. Well, I'd like to think that anyway, or at least some kind of methodology for doing all this stuff. So we do three things. We do think, so we do strategic consultancy. Clients come to us and ask us, why should we be open? How can we be open? What's the benefit of that? What's the business case for that? We do jams, which are diverse and creative workshops where we can do anything from look at insights all the way through to prototyping. What I'm here to talk today about is the crowd bit, and I'm going to just whiz through 4 case studies and give you some examples of what we thought were interesting questions. And I'm going to see if they're interesting for you, because we'll try and do a bit of a brainstorm in a minute. Okay, so that's the layout of the toolkit. You start by defining the strategy, all the way around to building business partnerships. So in this toolkit you'll find examples of different business models you can use, different ways for people to collaborate and partner, but also some of the kind of craft skills of open innovation, if you like, from finding unmet needs, convening collaborative workshops. We're going to look at this bit today, discover new ideas, and within that, obviously asking interesting questions. So, Lego hired us. Any Lego fans in the audience today? Oh yeah, okay, good. I'll dwell on this case study then. So they came to us, 7 years ago, and asked the question I just talked about. How can we be more open? Why should we be more open? What's the business case for being more open? And it was interesting, as a kind of strategy project, our first job was to interview a whole bunch of Lego people and ask them that question, really. And it turned out, after very few interviews, that Lego people around the world were by nature open. They were already engaged in a whole bunch of really interesting open activities. They were doing, there was a little crowd in Japan called Kuso, which means I wish, and they were experimenting with consumer co-creation there. There was a bunch of initiatives in the UK where they were working with educationalists to look at the educational value of play. The only problem was no one had told the board of Lego that they were doing this. So we were going around the globe discovering that, in fact, the soul of this company was extremely open. It's just the leadership didn't kind of know that. So So it was very, therefore it became very easy to say, okay, well, let's try some stuff out. So the first thing we did was create a colleague crowd. So if you're new to open innovation and a large company, it's kind of scary for a number of reasons. One, you're saying to the public, we don't know what we're doing, we need help, right? So, and most companies don't like doing that. They don't like admitting they need help. And secondly, it's a bit strange, you know. You expect people to sign up to these things and give their own time freely. You expect our staff to kind of engage in this stuff. Who pays for that? Who signs that off? So we start with doing an internal crowd for Lego. And at Lego, like in most places, the creativity resides in one team, the design team. But we asked factory managers what their strategy should be. We asked people that run the shops, the retail side of things, what their strategy should be. We asked people in the accounts department what their strategy should be. And it was like someone had switched on a light at Lego, and people had kind of never really been asked their opinion about this stuff, really got into it. And once you switch on that light, it's kind of difficult to switch it off. So that internal experiment turned into legoideas.com, which is now the biggest crowdsourcing site in the world, with 2 million customer co-creators. And I think it's something like 4 out of 5 of the biggest selling toys since the millennium have been co-created on that site. Incidentally, talking about incentives, Lego are very generous with their incentives. They give 1% of the revenue of successful toys back to the boy or girl or adult fan of Lego that invents it. So there's plenty of rich little boys and girls out there as a result of that thing. But that's a spirit of generosity and a sense of give and get is absolutely what we try and build into our crowds. The best question, actually, that we have asked internally was this: how can we double the fun of the Lego play experience? Now, I reckon that's a good question, but I don't know for certain. I'm going to try it out on you. So, if it's true that interesting questions sort of produce easy ideas, let's hear from you guys. How do you think we could double the fun of the Lego play experience? Anyone? It is a really bad question. Come on. Yeah.
Create modular tubes of Lego.
Love it. Great idea. Yeah.
Motorized.
Yeah, cool.
We spent more time digging through the bucket to find the piece that you wanted, and actually putting stuff together. So somehow tracking the pieces.
That's genius.
So you don't have to look.
Yeah.
You spent hours looking for that one little piece that you know you had.
I hear your frustration. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah, having either digital screens or else having like a 3D printer with Legos. So
Hey, that's brilliant.
Your own design.
Thank you. You guys got to get on the site quickly. Riches await you. Thank you. Well, that seemed to work. And that's kind of the lesson here, is that if you don't know whether your question is interesting, just try it out. It's a process of prototyping that no one ever bothers with. They think, oh, I've got a great question. I'm going to answer it. But no one tries it out. So good. Thank you for your ideas. That's lovely. The best answer for that idea, incidentally, was playing with other people, making Lego more sociable. Because a lot of boys, especially, just kind of play on their own. I know I did. It's very sad. Whereas girls tend to play together, obviously. So the kind of answer to that was more about behaviour and play situation. So that's number one. Unilever, we did a lot of work in FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods. We do a whole bunch of work with Unilever. They obviously make soap, and they are kind of global company that's as siloed and as unjoined up as most global organizations are. So we do a lot of work with them doing what we call online jams. So we get all their research scientists on the internet jamming together in different places. And that's probably, and we kind of internally crowdsource the questions. So we say to all their scientists, okay, well, what do you want to ask? And then we get them to vote on the questions to see whether they're the most interesting ones. That's probably the best question that they've come up with. How can I wash my home, myself, or my clothes with a single cup of water? Let's try it again. Any ideas for that? Let me just process that for a minute. How do you do that? That's crazy, right? Single cup of water. Anyone? Yes, please, yeah.
Try things like direction food don't use the water at all.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Why use water in the first place? Totally. People that live in the desert historically just use sand for washing, right? So why is water so special? Any other ideas? So that one. It's a bit more technical. The actual idea they came up with, or that the crowd responded with, was partnerships with appliance manufacturers. So it wasn't actually within Unilever's gift to solve that problem. It was in the entire system of washing. Okay, so but that's an even better idea. So I'll suggest that to them. Thank you. Let's go on. So just to pause for thought there. I was listening to the radio the other day, and Werner Herzog, German film director, said this. I think he's a bit of a genius, and I love this stuff. He says, it's better to ask a question that is deep and strange and unexpected than having the answer to everything. There's a humility about that, which I really like. And there's a humility about that that is useful when you're designing challenges. A lot of companies, a lot of agents like us adopt a kind of knowing tone, but actually it's better to be humble and ask a good question. So I just thought I'd share that with you. The tool that I'm kind of plugging today is the Interesting Questions tool, and you'll find it on the toolkit. The best part of it is this sort of bullseye chart here. So remember I said just now that the best way to get interesting questions is just to try them out. So what we normally do in a jams situation is get, so I was in Cairo last week doing this, trying to source an interesting question for a breast cancer foundation. And they had a whole bunch of questions. And I didn't know which was interesting and which wasn't. So we got them to vote in the room. There were 30 cancer doctors and nurses. And they told me what the most interesting question is. So trying stuff out is important. But if it helps, you can brainstorm yourself or some colleagues and have this kind of bullseye here. Around here, the questions are too broad, too vague, too all-encompassing, too kind of difficult to get purchase on. In the middle, there'll be questions that are too narrow, too nerdy, too technical, that no one can answer because they're too specialist. But in the middle, there's a kind of Goldilocks zone of interesting questions. So whilst this is more art than science, I would recommend you just source somehow a whole bunch of questions and try them out and arrange them on that chart. That's the essence of that particular tool. So on to another quick case study. Now these are questions I don't know the answer to because they're live challenges. We're working with Ford, amazing company. They kind of invented industrial processes, and they're in the middle of, I think, reinventing themselves. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying this, trying to position themselves from motors to mobility as cities change the way they work and we change the patterns of life. Apparently, even here in the States, young people are less and less likely to even want to drive. I found that absolutely fascinating for a place like this. So that's part of the context for the city mobility challenges, which we're running currently. So we started in Detroit, then we went to New York, and now we're doing Pittsburgh, Miami-Dade, and Grand Rapids. And what the idea about this is we create a crowd. The challenges are co-sponsored by the mayor of each of these places, and what we're trying to do with Ford and the city officials is to create new ways of for people to get around. Okay, that's basically it. So here are some questions. Some are less interesting than others, I feel, but I thought I'd try them out on you. So how might we design commutes in Pittsburgh that are seamless, welcoming, and intuitive? There's some interesting words in there, right? You don't think of commutes being seamless or intuitive or even welcoming. What's a welcoming commute like? Okay, so the idea is to put words in these questions that are unexpected and kind of trip you up a little bit to start your mental processes. So you might have some ideas. I haven't got time to kind of go through all these, but you might have some ideas about that. If so, you can log on to City of Tomorrow and try and win a prize. How might we make daily journeys fresh, easy, and adaptable to the needs of Miami-Dade residents? And again, what's a fresh daily journey like, right? What does that actually mean? What can that So it isn't like, how can we improve transportation in Miami-Dade? Because that's a boring, vague question. It isn't about, specific apps or ways of multimodal transportation enhancement. Yada, yada. That's too nerdy and specific. It's, I think, in the Goldilocks zone of kind of, to get you thinking. How might we create a seamless transportation system to improve quality of life for residents and visitors? So that isn't about travel, it's about quality of life. So we've taken a kind of another kind of level to that question. So anyway, there's a bunch of life challenges now, so check them out if you're interested in smart cities or transportation or fraud or just like challenges. And yeah, you can also check out the answers that people are providing. The last one, UBS, Swiss Bank. Have you heard of UBS? They're an investment banking firm, kind of big over here as well. So you can do this in traditionally rather closed industries too. Their problem was they thought that investors were less interested in the impact of emissions impact of investments than they were. So the question we asked, this was an internal crowd actually, the question we asked all their global workforce was, how can we empower investors to consider the carbon dioxide impact of their investment decisions? And it wasn't how can we inform them, or how can we kind of, compel them to consider the carbon dioxide impact. It was how can we empower them. So the language there is very deliberately chosen. It's like, okay, we know you want to minimise the harm that your investments are doing. How can we help you do that? And that unlocked a whole different level of conversation, of partnership between investors and their advisors. And the answer to that was a whole bunch of apps and things and ways of behaving. But that is one from the financial services sector. Lastly, ICRC, or the Red Cross. And the question, we had a community, a global community with Red Cross people in it, but also beneficiaries themselves, so people in refugee camps who are normally way out of the loop and not really consulted about the problems they have or the solutions they could generate. So our question there was how can Red Cross staff and beneficiaries help victims of conflict and disaster in innovative ways? And by including the people that one was helping, it was had two effects. One, you got some really good ideas. One was about understanding where conflict was happening, how to triangulate locations based on GPS and mobile telephony. But the other was that our clients, the Red Cross, became much more empathetic and in tune with the needs of those beneficiaries and had a conversation with them rather than acting on behalf of them. So it was good culturally, I think, for the Red Cross as well. So I hope you've enjoyed kind of thinking about some of those interesting questions. I just want to do a summary slide. And one thing I haven't mentioned is that the question needs to be interesting to you, the asker, as much as it needs to be interesting to the outside world. There's nothing more depressing than finding the Holy Grail. I've got a fantastic new technology, and you bring it back to the company and no one really cares because they didn't ask for it, or it's not on the plan, or it doesn't fit the strategy. So do your research first and try and get the company engaged behind the strategy, and then you won't have that problem. It's got to be motivating to the crowd. I think I've talked about that. It's got to pass the Goldilocks test. I've talked about that. So it's got to be in that sweet spot between nerdy and vague. Jargon-free. So I hope you agree that none of those questions were jargon-free. And the point about that is our questions, we want them to be tweeted, we want them to be passed out through social media, we want them to be amplified. And if they're nerdy and technical, no one's going to bother. If they're interesting and kind of sticky, then they will bother. And that increases the reach of our competitions and increases the engagement with them. They should, of course, be answerable. There's no point in torturing people with unanswerable questions. And the way to find out whether they're answerable is to prototype the challenge first. Get a small bunch of people, check it out, see if they're answerable. Short. One of those questions was 20 words exactly. All of them were fewer than 20 words apart from that. So it's got to be short or you'll lose people's interest. And I've said a number of times, road test them. Okay, I don't think you have to get it right first time. There's no prizes for getting a bad question out really soon. There are lots of prizes for getting a great question out when it's ready. Well, I hope that was interesting. If you've got any questions, make them interesting, please.
Do you have any question?
Or any answers?
Talk about the process of road testing and
Sure.
questions.
So it's generally best done in a room rather than on the internet, because you can then interrogate why things are interesting. We invoke democracy. So the best way to do it is get a whole bunch of questions in a workshop. We do it in the context of a tool we call the challenge design tool. So why are we doing this? What are we asking? And then just get people to vote. Use dot voting. So in Cairo last week, I think 35 different questions that were generated by the internal team. And there comes a point in the workshop where you say, okay, how interesting are these questions? Let's find out. And then, it's not me, the consultant, telling them what's interesting, it's them telling themselves what's interesting. So just, a bit of democracy, a bit of dot voting, a bit of discussion. And then the second stage is to try them out with some real people.
Do you ever find that you kind of like meld two of the best ideas, or is it
No, it's fatal. People love to try and get, shoehorn 3 or 4 questions into one because they think it's better value. But it just muddles people. So it's much better to ask a series. And what you can do is ask sequential questions. But my advice would be keep them really single-minded. Thank you. Great question. Any others? Yeah, thank you.
How do you maximize that if you do have to use an online platform, whatever limitations? How do you maximize collaboration and interaction?
That's a nice one. We don't have our own platform, so we choose supplier platforms that fit the level of collaboration we want to encourage. We've got a program in Indonesia at the moment, which is about plastics recycling solar energy. And what we're doing is we are encouraging people to collaborate by asking them to pin their names and contact details on the board. So we don't get to give away any IP, but we get them to signal them, put their hand up, I want to collaborate. And that works. Occasionally we, have a look at the Ford programs. Those, because they're B2C communities, they absolutely encourage interaction. Formal interactions such as voting, commenting, and informal interactions such as meetups and kind of face-to-face things. So it's rather case dependent, but if it's business, you need to be a little bit more careful about IP. If it's B2C, then the more conversations you have, the more ideas you have, the more value you get. Thank you.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.